Tonight, you will be listening to John Lewis Esposito talking about Islam, yesterday, today, and tomorrow from the Great World Religion series.
The images and realities of Islam and of Muslims are multiple and diverse. This diversity is seen in a number of phenomena worldwide. In the many cultures in which Islam is to be found, from Africa to Southeast Asia, from Europe to North America. In the diversity of women's dress, educational and professional opportunities, and participation in mosques and societies, which differs widely from country to country across the Muslim world. If women in some Muslim societies are fully covered in public, cannot drive cars, and are sexually segregated, women in many parts of the Muslim world wear a rich variety of clothing styles, drive cars, ride motorcycles, are among the top students in universities, serve in government, have been prime ministers or president of Turkey, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Indonesia, and are to be seen in the professions. We will discuss this further in our class on women. The diversity is also seen in politics. In Turkey, Algeria, Jordan, Egypt, Kuwait, Yemen, Pakistan, and Malaysia. In all of these countries, we see Islamic activists peacefully pressing for the implementation of religion in state and society. And members of Islamic organizations have been elected to parliaments, served in cabinets, been prime minister. At the same time, extremist groups have engaged in acts of violence and terror. We see diversity in social action. Islamic organizations, associations provide a host of social services, inexpensive and efficient educational, legal, and medical services in the slums and many lower middle class neighborhoods of Cairo, Algiers, Beirut, Mindanao, the West Bank, Gaza. On the other hand, terrorists, in the name of Islam, hijacked commercial airliners and flew into New York's World Trade Center towers and the Pentagon in Washington, resulting in the loss of some 3,000 lives. The hijackers who committed this act reflected a religious radicalism that has threatened many governments and societies in the Muslim world, and as we've seen also, Europe and America. The geographic, cultural, and religious diversity of Islam reflects its status as a world religion with a global presence and impact. Islam is the second largest and among the fastest growing of the world's religions. Some would argue that it is the fastest growing. The more than 1.2 billion followers can be found in some 56 Muslim countries, extending from North Africa to Southeast Asia, and as minority communities from Europe and America to China, Thailand, and the southern Philippines. Muslims then include many peoples, many races, languages, ethnic groups, tribes, and cultures. Only a little more than 20% of the world's Muslims are Arab, and yet most people equate Islam with the Arabs. The majority of Muslims live in Asia and Africa. The largest Muslim communities are in Indonesia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, Nigeria, not one Arab country. Then one could move on to talk about countries like Egypt or Iran. Islam is a visible presence in the West as the second largest religion in Europe, in particular France, Germany, and England, as we'll discuss towards the end of this course, and soon to be the second largest in America. It's currently third largest, after Christianity and Judaism. However, despite the size, global presence, and significance of the Islamic community, negative images, myths, stereotypes, and misinformation about Islam and Muslims continue to abound. Many would say, as a Muslim writer titled his book years ago, many would say today that one can still say that Islam is the misunderstood religion. The focus of this course will be to better understand Islam's role as a religion and as a way of life for more than 1.2 billion Muslims globally. In only 12 lectures, moving from Muhammad to the present, from the 7th to the 21st centuries, we will explore Muslim beliefs, practices, and history in the context of their significance and impact on Muslim life and society through the ages, as well as world events today. Thus, we will want to know the answers to many questions. From what do Muslims believe? Who was Muhammad? How do Muslims view Judaism and Christianity and other faiths? To what is jihad? Does the Quran condone violence and terrorism? Is Islam compatible with modernization, capitalism, democracy? And are women second-class citizens in Islam? And if so, why? The challenges we face are many. As is obvious, in such a limited time, we can never hope to do justice to Islam, nor any other faith for that matter. What we can do is provide information that can lead to a basic appreciation of Islam as a faith that has endured, prospered, and informed the lives of many, past and present. It is hoped that this discussion will motivate all who are interested to continue to study and learn in the future, to look to the bibliography that we've provided with the course and the materials. The study of Islam today, and this is a major problem that we face, the study of Islam today is motivated by and cannot escape the threat that radical Islam, that Muslim extremists and terrorists have posed to their own societies and to the West. It's easy for many of us to forget that significant interest in and awareness of Islam in recent decades was not driven by recognition that Islam was the second largest and perhaps fastest growing of the world's religions. Most people weren't even aware of that. But by the challenge and threat of the Iranian Revolution and the impact of what is called political Islam, or more popularly called Islamic fundamentalism. Too often we've seen Islam, the religion of the majority of Muslims, through the lens of terrorism, the actions of a deadly minority. Now, we don't do that with other faiths, and I'll talk about that in a short time. This problem is compounded by, and is especially true post-September 11, in the context of the war against global terrorism, and in particular Al-Qaeda. Thus, appreciation of the faith of the vast majority of Muslims has often been obscured by the tendency to view Islam and equate it with radical or revolutionary movements, their use of violence and terrorism. We don't do this when we encounter the acts of violence and terror committed by Christians or Jews. From Northern Ireland and Serbia, to those who blow up abortion clinics, or the extremists who killed Israel's Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, or Dr. Baruch Goldstein, who slaughtered Muslims at prayer in the Hebron Mosque in the 1990s. The majority of us have been raised in a Judeo-Christian culture or society, and we are or know many Jews and Christians. We immediately and instinctively contextualize these acts as the acts of extremists, as aberrations, not representative of the mainstream. Even when we use the word extremist, we mean extreme as compared to the mainstream, as compared to mainstream Judaism and Christianity. We do not have a similar knowledge and experience of Islam and Muslims. And indeed, when we talk about extremist Muslims, it's not as if we instinctively then use the term as extreme as compared to what? As compared to what norm? It's hard for most of us to remember that until the late 1970s, with the Iranian Revolution and the Soviet-Afghan War, Islam and Muslims were invisible, neither a part of our cognitive nor our geographic landscapes. I can vividly recall the reaction of friends and family when they learned that I intended to major in Islamic studies in the late 1960s. You'll never get a job. Why are you studying that abracadabra field? Having studied and taught Christian theology, and in the midst of graduate courses in Hinduism and Buddhism, my decision to study Islam seemed inexplicable. And indeed, I was actually against doing it. What I knew of Arabs and Muslims, basically through a few movies or media, made me think, why would I want to study it? I had to be pressured by the then chair of the religion department at Temple University. However, once I began to study Islam, I discovered a religious tradition with close affinities to Judaism and Christianity, with a rich religious, historical, and civilizational legacy that I had never been told about in school, in high school, and university. For example, while all Muslims believe in God, the Quran, and the teachings of Muhammad, there is a rich diversity of interpretation and cultural practices. I knew neither about Islam, nor did I know about this richness of cultural practices. And indeed, that's true for many people today. They see the axis, like when you engage a new ethnic group. You know, if you meet one Italian and he tends to move his hands a lot and seems emotional, and the only Italian you know, you think, well, all Italians are that way. Well, for many, the few Muslims that they see, the few actions, if they just discovered Islam during the Iranian Revolution and saw people shouting every day, death to America in the streets, the presumption was that these people represented all Muslims. Let's clarify several basic terms as we begin this course. Like Hebrew, Arabic has a consonant-based root system. The Arabic root SLM, from which the word Islam is derived, means submission and peace. It yields three important terms among many: Islam, Muslim, and Salam. Thus the word Islam literally means submission to God and peace, the peace that comes from following God's will, both to individuals and to a society. A Muslim is one who submits, one who seeks to actualize or realize God's will in history, both as an individual and as a member of a worldwide faith community. Finally, Salam, whose root is similar to that of the Hebrew shalom, or peace, is the common greeting that Muslims engage in. Salam alaikum. Peace be with you. Muslims believe that God has given the earth as a trust to humankind, and thus see themselves as God's representatives, God's vicegerent. Quran chapter 2 verse 30, chapter 6 verse 165. God's representative with a divinely mandated vocation to establish and spread God's religion, God's rule on earth. It is on the basis of how God's will in history is realized that a person will be rewarded or punished. Muslims see their community, ummah, as a transnational community of believers, God ordained and guided, which is to spread the faith and institutionalize an Islamic order, a, if you will, Pax Islamica, Islamic peace, as the Romans had a Pax Romana, to create a socially just society. As the Quran, chapter 3, verse 110 says, "You are the best community ever brought forth for mankind, enjoining what is good and forbidding evil." Islam belongs to the family of great monotheistic faiths, the children of Abraham: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Again, when I was growing up, and for a good deal of my early career, one studied Judaism and Christianity here and talked about a Judeo-Christian tradition, and Islam was put with the other world religions. It was put with Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, you name it. Very few talked about there being a Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition. But, as many of you will recall from the Bible, Sarah, the wife of Abraham, grown old and childless, told Abraham to have a child with Hagar, her handmaid or servant. Abraham and Hagar had a son, Ishmael. Subsequently, to their astonishment, Sarah became pregnant and gave birth to Isaac. Now, fearing her son Isaac would be overshadowed by Ishmael, who was the firstborn son, that Ishmael would receive, as it were, the inheritance, the senior male of the family, the mantle of leadership. Sarah convinced Abraham to send Hagar and Ishmael away, and they made their way to Arabia. Jews and Christians trace their genealogy to Abraham through Sarah and her son Isaac. Muslims represent the other branch of the family, of the Abrahamic family, the family which descends from Abraham's son Ishmael and Sarah's handmaid, Ishmael's mother, Hagar. While specific and significant differences exist, all the children of Abraham share a profound monotheism, belief in the one transcendent God, creator, sustainer, and ruler of the universe. This belief provides answers to the ultimate existential questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What should I be doing? Why does it matter? Why does it matter whether I'm moral or immoral, for example? All three faiths traditionally affirm a belief in angels, Satan, prophets, revelation, moral accountability and responsibility, divine judgment, reward and punishment, heaven and hell. Thus, for Muslims, Islam is the fulfillment and completion of God's earlier revelations to the biblical prophets of Judaism and Christianity. Indeed, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Mary are central in Muslim scripture and popular piety and practice, and indeed in naming. Ibrahim, Abraham. Musa, Moses. Isa, Jesus. Maryam, Mary. One of my Muslim friends has two sons, Musa and Isa. Moses and Jesus. Representing in his own family the Judeo-Christian Islamic family. Islam has had also a significant impact on world affairs. It is a dynamic religion that interfaces and at times competes with other faiths. In contrast to belief in the separation of church and state, Islam for many Muslims represents a more comprehensive worldview in which religion and society, faith and power are closely bound and intertwined. From the creation of the first Muslim community in 7th century Arabia to contemporary times, Muslims have debated and sought to implement God's will in their personal as well as public lives, in their families as well as states and societies. Thus, to be a Muslim was not simply to belong to a faith community or church, but to live in an Islamic community state governed by Islamic law. Many Muslims then see their religion as much more than a personal faith across time and space and throughout Islamic history. Historically, Islam has significantly formed and informed Muslim politics and civilizations, giving rise, as we shall see later, to vast Islamic empires and states, as well as a rich and dynamic Islamic civilization of arts, architecture, science, and medicine. In many ways, for example, the fathers of algebra, major contributions to astronomy, optics. As we shall see later in this course, from the time of Muhammad to the present, Muslims have engaged in a continuous process of applying Islam to the realities of life. Islamic law, theology, and mysticism reflect this complex process. Religious doctrines, laws, and practices result, though, not only from sacred texts, but also from fallible, limited human interpreters, whose conclusions reflect their intelligence, political and social context, and customs, as well as issues of power and privilege. In Islam, as in Judaism and Christianity, the Word of God has been mediated through the words of human beings. Religious traditions, beliefs, laws, and practices are the product of sacred texts and human interpreters, priests, monks, ministers, rabbis, and ulama, that is, Muslim religious scholars. The fact that interpreters and guardians of Islam were males living in patriarchal, male-dominated societies naturally affected the development of Islamic law and thought, especially its impact on women in the family. And we'll have a lot to say about that. While all Muslims believe in God, the Quran, and the teachings of Muhammad, there is then a rich diversity of interpretation and cultural practice. Islamic doctrines and laws developed in response to political and social questions and issues. Who should succeed the Prophet? if somebody committed a major sin, a major negative act as a Muslim, if they assassinated the caliph, for example, what did that mean in terms of their future in the next life? Religion and politics, the development of theology and politics, closely intertwined. And we'll see that the same is true for the development of law and for the development of mysticism. Thus, while in one sense it is correct to say that there is one Islam, revealed in the Quran and in the traditions of the Prophet, as we shall now see, Islamic tradition and heritage reveal the extent to which there have been many interpretations of Islam, some complementing each other, others in conflict. Now, again, this shouldn't surprise us. We often say Christianity, but there are in fact many Christianities: Catholics, Lutherans, Methodists, Unitarians. And the same can be said with regard to Judaism. The result has been within Islam the development of two major branches of Islam, Sunni and Shi'i, as well as diverse schools of law, theology, and mysticism, revivalist and reform movements, as well as extremist groups and organizations. As Muslims today, like Jews and Christians, contend with the relationship of their faith to modernity or post-modernity, from issues of faith and history to politics, society, science, and technology, many questions arise. I'll state some here that we'll be pursuing, but there'll be others in the course. Should Islam be restricted to personal life or integral to state, law, and society? Is Islam compatible with modern notions of democracy, secularism, human rights, pluralism, tolerance, in particular concerning the status of religious minorities, non-Muslims, and women? Muslims also face questions regarding the relationship of the Islamic world to the West. Christian-Muslim relations are often seen by non-Muslims through the stereotype of jihad and extremism. In contrast, many Muslims see too often in history a militant Judeo-Christian tradition epitomized by the Crusades, Inquisition, European colonialism, Zionism, and what many call American neo-colonialism. So as you can see, at times there can be rather sharp and contrasting images of the other. But the fact is, and I should point out it, that there are many Muslims and non-Muslims alike who cross those boundaries, who blur that distinction, and can see the acts of militancy of the past, not only in the other, but within their own tradition and within their own heritage. And indeed, that is the challenge that we face in the 21st century, in an era of globalization. To have that level of self-criticism, and if you will, that level of a global, pluralist, self-critical worldview. Critics of the United States' actions in the Muslim world condemn support for authoritarian Arab and Muslim regimes during the Cold War and the post-Cold War, and continuing down to the present. Support by America and Europe, they would charge. Support today for Russia's occupation of Chechnya and its cleansing of Chechnya, and of what many in the Arab and Muslim world charge is a bias or a tilt towards Israel and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and towards India and Indian rule over a Muslim-majority population in Kashmir and the current conflict in Kashmir. Such perceptions often lead both sides to perceive an impending clash of civilizations. And indeed, many of us can recall, not only before, but certainly after 9/11, many, when they asked the question why, it's us and them. They're against everything we stand for. Or they simply hate us. Not that there may be causes for the spawning of terrorism, not to excuse terrorism, but those things that develop terrorism, but rather almost a blind clash of civilization. In recent years, the questions of Islam and the West are joined to those of Islam in the West. Many issues are related to Muslim assimilation in non-Muslim countries. What does it mean to live in a country where Islamic law plays no role? American Muslims, European Muslims have to face this. How do Muslims cope with living in a secular America or Europe that recognizes Christian and Jewish holidays or holy days and customs, but has often been hesitant to accommodate Muslim Friday prayer, holy days, or the custom of women's headscarves? Muslims have struggled to open mosques and schools, as well as faced harassment and hate crimes. And this is particularly increased post 9/11. As we sit here in this part of the 21st century, it is very difficult because we are, on the one hand, looking at Islam, a global religion, the way in which we look at Judaism, Christianity, as we are in this course, or Hinduism and Buddhism. But many of us who are non-Muslims continue, until we learn more about what Islam and mainstream Islam and the vast majority of Muslims believe and stand for, we will continue to view Islam and Muslims through the lens of radicalism. I recently did an online chat on a Muslim site. And I had questions from Muslims all over the world. But suddenly I had a question from someone in the United States, a non-Muslim, who simply said, "Why are you in this conversation with all these terrorists?" There was nothing in the nature of the conversation, the questions, answers, that was advocating violence or terror, etc. It was a sweeping assertion. And I and others have seen these kinds of statements in the media. Many of you have seen statements made, regrettably, by some of our religious leaders, fortunately denounced by most, but people like Pat Robertson and Franklin Graham using phrases like Islam is evil, not extremists are evil, not drawing a line between extremists and mainstream, the very line they would want drawn when it comes to Christianity. Muslims face the 21st century in their original homelands, that is in Muslim countries, or in Europe and America, in a context in which finding answers within historical tradition is a time-honored strategy. As we shall see, like many other faiths, the tension between change and continuity with long-held traditions often produces a struggle and a conflict between conservatives or traditionalists and reformers. Like the Reformation and Counter-Reformation, with its struggle between Protestants and Catholics, the struggle for the soul of Islam today is not only one of lively and contentious theological debate, but regrettably can also spill over into violence and bloodshed. As we turn to the heart of this course, we will seek to understand the faith and history of Islam, its ideals and realities, the inspiration and guidance that so many Muslims have found in their Islamic faith across time and space. At the same time, we will want to examine the challenges and diverse responses of Muslims to life in the 20th and now the 21st centuries. Thus, we shall address basic questions. What are the basic beliefs and practices that unify all Muslims? Who was the Prophet Muhammad, and what is the Quran? Why and how do they continue to be so influential in Muslim faith and life? How did the Muslim community grow and develop? What was the relationship of religion to politics and society? Why are Islamic law and mysticism so important for an understanding of Islam? How has religion affected Muslim women and the family, past and present? What is Islamic revivalism or fundamentalism? How have Muslims responded to modernity? What are the challenges that Islam and Muslims face in the 21st century?